The Intergalactic Educational Exchange Program had been a resounding success for nearly 20 years, bringing together young minds from across the galaxy to live, learn, and understand one another. The concept was simple but revolutionary. Create a neutral space where students from dozens of species could interact in a controlled environment, designed to accommodate the vast array of biological needs while providing a shared academic experience. This term's cohort was particularly diverse, with representatives from 17 different planetary systems. The program's administrators had chosen Earth's orbital platform Harmonia as the hosting site, citing its adaptable environmental controls and proximity to the fascinating but still relatively isolated human homeworld. Adrian Mercer had been the chief medical officer for the platform for nearly 5 years, and despite his genuine commitment to interspecies medicine, even he had to admit that some days tested his patience. His small medical bay had been retrofitted with equipment designed to handle most of the common species in the program, but there were limits to what the facility could address. More than once, he found himself researching exotic physiologies at 3 a.m., trying to determine if a particular student's symptoms were normal or cause for alarm. Today marked the beginning of the term's physical orientation, a series of team-building exercises designed to break down cultural barriers through shared physical challenges. The exercises have been carefully designed to be accessible to all species while still pushing students slightly out of their comfort zones. Adrian had set up a small first aid station near the main activity field, expecting the usual minor scrapes and exhaustion cases. Among the new students were several who would soon become familiar faces in his medical bay. Xyler was a crystalline silicate from the Aldebaran system. His people evolved on a high-pressure world with a silicon-based biology that resulted in bodies of crystalline structures layered over flexible silicon lattice cores. They were remarkably resilient to pressure, but prone to fracturing under sudden impacts. At just over 5 feet tall, with a body that refracted light in mesmerizing patterns, Xyler moved with a careful, deliberate grace that spoke to his species' innate awareness of their fragility. Thar belonged to the Ursan collective, massive Ursine-like beings with incredible strength and thick, almost armor-like fur. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and powerful limbs, Thar was actually considered small by his species standards. Despite their intimidating appearance, the Ursans were known for their gentle nature and extreme caution when dealing with smaller species, a caution that sometimes translated to awkwardness in mixed-species settings. Mira was from Aquila Prime, a world of rapid evolution and abundant predators. Her species had developed extraordinary regenerative capabilities, able to regrow small appendages and heal wounds that would be fatal to other beings. This biological advantage had shaped their cultural approach to injury. Temporary damage was often ignored entirely, as their bodies would simply repair themselves. Myra's iridescent skin and quick, darting movements reflected her species' predatory ancestry. Alori represented the Thespian conclave, a species of empathic beings whose bodies appeared almost incorporeal, composed of a luminescent gas contained within a semi-permeable membrane. The Thespians viewed physical injury as a manifestation of spiritual disharmony, treating all wounds with both practical and ceremonial approaches. Alori's body shifted through colors as she spoke, her emotions visible to anyone who knew how to interpret the spectrum. The day had begun smoothly enough. The students had been divided into mixed-species teams and set to work on their first challenge, constructing a temporary shelter using only the materials provided, which would be suitable for all team members. The exercise was designed to force students to consider the diverse needs of their teammates while working together toward a common goal. Adrian had been quietly observing from his station, noting with satisfaction that most teams were making good progress. The Harmonia's artificial gravity had been adjusted to a median setting that most species could tolerate, though a few students wore gravity compensators to help them adjust. The activity field surface had been covered with a specialized impact-absorbing material that could accommodate various locomotion methods, from walking and slithering to hovering and bouncing. The accident happened an hour into the exercise. Xyler had been carefully positioning a support beam for his team's shelter when Kthar, backing up to survey their progress, bumped into the crystalline being. The collision was gentle by Kthar's standards, barely a nudge, but for Xyler, it was enough. There was an audible crack as Xyler fell, landing awkwardly on his arm. A visible fracture line appeared across his upper limb, the normally smooth crystalline surface now marred by a jagged fissure that caught the light in troubling ways. The reaction from the students was immediate and chaotic. Alori's body flashed crimson with alarm as she began to hover in quick circles around Xyler, emitting a high-pitched keening that seemed to be some form of healing chant. Mira had dropped to her knees beside the injured student, already pulling from her personal kit what looked like a viscous, pulsating gel. "Structural integrity compromised," someone shouted. "We need a pressure chamber immediately." Another student, a methane-breathing Jovian, was frantically waving a device that appeared to be scanning Xyler's injury. Crystalline lattice disruption at 42% and increasing. Emergency stabilization required. Kthar stood frozen in horror, his massive frame trembling slightly as he stared at the consequences of his carelessness. I didn't mean to. Is he going to shatter?" The genuine fear in the huge being's voice was palpable. Adrian moved quickly through the crowd of agitated students, medical kit in hand. "Everyone step back, please. Give him air." This was, of course, somewhat ironic given that several species present didn't actually breathe air, but the intention was clear. As the students reluctantly created space, Adrian knelt beside Xyler, whose crystalline body was vibrating in what appeared to be either pain or fear. "Can you tell me what you're feeling, Xyler?" Adrian asked calmly, already running a specialized scanner over the injured limb. "Structural integrity compromised," Xyler managed, his voice a strange, melodic tremor. "I can feel the fracture expanding. In my species, such damage often progresses until complete structural failure occurs." Adrian nodded, studying the scanner results. The fracture was indeed significant, but contained to the outer crystalline layer. The vital silicon lattice core remained intact, and the scanner showed no signs of progressive spreading. "All right, I understand your concern, but I want you to try to remain still. This fracture is limited to your outer layer, and I don't see evidence that it's spreading." Adrian reached into his kit and removed a specialized stabilizing spray designed for silicon-based life forms. "I'm going to apply a temporary sealant that will prevent further damage. Then we'll immobilize your arm." Alori had stopped her keening, but now hovered anxiously nearby, her body still pulsing with concerned reds and oranges. In our culture, such a wound requires immediate spiritual cleansing. The physical damage is merely a manifestation of inner discord. I must perform the ritual of harmonic restoration. Mira pushed forward, still clutching her gel. "Nonsense. His biology requires immediate cellular stimulation. This regenerative matrix will accelerate lattice reconstruction. We use it for all significant injuries." Adrian held up a hand. "I appreciate everyone's concern, but Xyler's biology is well documented in our medical database. The approach I'm taking is specifically designed for crystalline silicate physiology." He finished applying the spray, which immediately hardened into a clear, protective layer over the fracture. Next, Adrian gently wrapped Xyler's arm in a specialized sling that would prevent movement and further stress on the injured area. As he worked, he continued to speak in calm, measured tones. "The fracture needs time to stabilize. Your natural healing processes will gradually reconnect the crystalline matrix, but it needs to be protected while that happens." "How long?" Xyler asked, his voice still wavering. Adrian secured the sling and sat back. "About 3 weeks, giving or taking a few days, depending on how your specific biology responds. You'll need to ice the area regularly to reduce internal pressure and keep the arm immobilized." "Ice?" Several alien voices asked simultaneously, the concept clearly confusing to many. "Yes, ice," Adrian confirmed. "Cold compression will help maintain structural integrity while the healing process occurs. 20 minutes for times daily." He reached into his kit and removed what looked like a simple gel pack. "This is a medical cold compress designed for your specific biology. When activated, It maintains the optimal temperature for silicon-based tissue without risking thermal shock. The gathered students exchanged confused glances. Alori's body had shifted to a puzzled blue-green. That's all? No quantum restructuring? No molecular realignment? I said, and you'll be fine, Adrian confirmed with a slight shrug. The body knows how to heal itself, often better than our interventions. Sometimes the best medicine is simply creating the right conditions and letting nature take its course. The silence that followed was profound. It was Kthar who finally broke it, his deep voice surprisingly small. You're saying he won't shatter? He's not going to die. Adrian looked genuinely surprised. No, absolutely not. It's a stable fracture with no involvement of critical systems. It's painful and inconvenient, certainly, but with proper care, it will heal completely. The relief from Kthar was palpable, but many of the other students looked far from convinced. Mira actually snorted, a sound her species made to indicate disbelief. With respect, Medical Officer Mercer, she said, not entirely respectfully, your approach seems primitive. On our world, such an injury would be fully healed within hours using regenerative technology. I'm sure it would, Adrian acknowledged. And different approaches work for different species. But crystalline silicate biology responds well to this treatment protocol, and it carries minimal risk of complications. Sometimes simpler is better. As Adrian helped Xyler to his feet, he could hear the murmurs spreading through the gathered students. The words primitive, basic, and even barbaric were clearly audible. Alori had drifted away, her body now a disappointed shade of mauve, while Mira was already engaged in a heated discussion with several other students about the shocking inadequacy of human medical practices. Xyler himself seemed torn, glancing between his immobilized arm and the retreating forms of his fellow students. You're certain this will be sufficient? He asked Adrian, doubt evident in his tone. I am, Adrian assured him. Come see me tomorrow for a follow-up, and we'll monitor your progress. He glanced around at the dispersing crowd. And try not to let their concern worry you. Different cultures have different approaches to medicine. Doesn't make any of them wrong, just different. As Xyler made his way back to his team, moving with even more caution than before, Adrian sighed and began repacking his medical kit. First week of the term, and the cultural misunderstandings were already in full swing. He'd been through this before. The initial shock when students from highly advanced medical cultures encountered the sometimes straightforward approach of human medicine. It always took time for them to understand that technological sophistication wasn't always the same as effective treatment. He made a note in his data pad to check on Xyler first thing the next morning. Despite his confidence in the treatment plan, he knew that the student would be facing a barrage of well-meaning but potentially confusing advice from his peers. The last thing Adrian needed was for someone to attempt an unauthorized improvement to his treatment that might actually cause harm. As the day continued, Adrian found himself dealing with a steady stream of minor injuries. A mild allergic reaction from a Neptunian student who'd accidentally touched a material incompatible with their biochemistry, a sprained tentacle from an enthusiastic cephalopoid who'd overextended during a climbing exercise, a case of atmospheric sensitivity in a group of gaseous students when the environmental controls briefly fluctuated. For each case, Adrian's approach was similar, targeted, specific treatment based on the species' biology, with an emphasis on supporting natural healing processes rather than technological interventions. And with each case, he received the same mixture of doubt, confusion, and occasional disdain from the observing students. By the end of the day, Adrian had become aware of the nickname already spreading among the students. Iceman, not for any perceived coldness in his manner, but for his seemingly universal prescription of cold compresses and rest for a wide variety of injuries. He couldn't help but smile at the irony. If only they knew how much specialized knowledge went into knowing when not to intervene too aggressively. Over the next few days, the orientation activities continued, and so did the minor injuries. Adrian's medical bay saw a steady stream of students with various complaints, from environmental discomfort to minor accidents. Each time, he He provided targeted care that often seemed simpler than what many students expected, further cementing his reputation. Zyler returned as instructed for his follow-up, his arms still in the sling, but his overall demeanor calmer. "The fracture hasn't expanded," he reported, "and the pain has decreased by approximately 32%. Adrian examined the injury, noting with satisfaction that the protective sealant was holding well and that the edges of the fracture showed the first signs of natural reintegration. "You're healing right on schedule," he confirmed. "Have you been using the cold compress as directed?" "Yes, though many of my classmates have suggested alternative treatments." Zyler's crystalline surface shimmered in what Adrian had come to recognize as mild embarrassment. "Alori attempted to perform a harmonizing ritual while I was sleeping. I didn't have the heart to stop her, though I'm not sure it had any effect." Adrian managed not to smile. Cultural exchanges are what this program is all about. As long as no one is attempting anything invasive or contradictory to your treatment plan, there's no harm in it. As Zyler left, Adrian reviewed his schedule for the day. Among the appointments was a follow-up with a human student, Lena Chun, who had experienced a mild allergic reaction to a synthesized protein in one of the communal meals. A simple antihistamine had resolved the issue, but Adrian had requested a follow-up to ensure no recurrence. Lena arrived promptly, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her expression wry. "The Iceman himself," she greeted him. "You're becoming quite famous among the non-human students." Adrian raised an eyebrow as he scanned her vitals. "I've heard. Apparently, my medical practices are somewhere between quaintly primitive and criminally negligent, depending on who you ask. If it makes you feel any better, most of the human students think you're doing a great job." Lena held out her arm for a blood sample. Besides, results speak for themselves. Zyler's already showing improvement, which has confused a lot of people who were convinced he was going to shatter into a million pieces by the end of the week. The expectations gap is always the biggest challenge in the first month, Adrian observed, completing his scan. "Your histamine levels are back to normal, by the way. Just continue to avoid that particular synthesized protein, and you should be fine." Lena nodded, but her expression had grown thoughtful. "You know, it's interesting how many of the alien students seem to rely on immediate technological fixes for every physical problem. Some of them were shocked when I told them humans still get headaches occasionally, or that we might take days to recover from a virus. Different evolutionary paths lead to different expectations," Adrian replied, making notes in her file. "Many species developed advanced medical technology specifically because their bodies don't have our natural resilience or healing capabilities. Others come from environments so hostile that immediate medical intervention is the difference between life and death. Still, there's something to be said for sometimes letting your body do what it evolved to do," Lena said, rolling down her sleeve. "My grandmother was a doctor in rural China. She used to say that half of medicine is knowing when to act, and half is knowing when to wait." Adrian smiled. "Your grandmother sounds wise. That philosophy has served human medicine well for centuries, even as our technology has advanced." Later that afternoon, the medical bay's relative calm was shattered by an urgent call from the athletic fields. A student had been injured during an improvised game that had combined elements of human soccer with various alien sporting traditions. Adrian grabbed his emergency kit and hurried to the scene, already mentally reviewing the likely species involved and potential injuries based on the activities. What he found was chaos. A small crowd had gathered around a figure on the ground. Lena, her face contorted in pain. Beside her, Kthar was kneeling, his massive form hunched in clear distress, one hand hovering uncertainly over Lena's obviously broken leg. The limb was bent at an unnatural angle, with the clear protrusion of bone visible beneath the skin, an open fracture. "I didn't see her," Kthar was saying, his voice breaking. "We collided, and I heard it break. I've killed her, haven't I? Human bones don't regenerate. I've killed her." The alien students around them were in various states of panic or action. Mira had already produced a regenerative gel again and was arguing with Alori, whose gaseous body was fluctuating wildly through emergency colors. Two mechanoid students were apparently attempting to design a bone replacement on the spot, their optical sensors scanning Lena's leg while they rapidly exchanged technical specifications. Everyone back. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos as he knelt beside Lena. Thar, I need you to move aside so I can examine her. The massive alien reluctantly shifted, his fur bristling with distress. I've killed her, haven't I? He repeated. She's hardly dead, Thar, Adrian said firmly, already carefully examining the fracture. Lena, I need you to tell me your pain level, 1 to 10. Lena, pale but conscious, grimaced. 8. Maybe 9. It happened so fast. We were playing, and then suddenly, she broke off with a gasp as Adrian gently palpated around the injury. Open tibial fracture, he murmured, reaching for his scanner. Lena, I'm going to give you something for the pain now. He pressed a hypo spray to her neck, administering a fast-acting analgesic. This will help within seconds. The gathering of alien students had grown larger, their reactions ranging from horrified fascination to urgent offers of assistance. Mira pushed forward again, her regenerative gel at the ready. You must apply cellular accelerant immediately, she insisted. The bone is exposed to air. Infection and tissue death will begin shortly. Adrian didn't look up from his work. Thank you, Mira, but human physiology doesn't respond well to xenobiological treatments. The risk of rejection or adverse reaction is too high. He had already begun cleaning the wound area with an antiseptic solution while carefully avoiding moving the fracture bone. But it's just bone and skin, another student protested. Surely the regenerative principles are universal. Biology is rarely universal, Adrian replied calmly. He had removed a stabilizing device from his kit and was carefully positioning it around Lena's leg. The cellular structure of human bone is significantly different from many species. What heals one can harm another. As the pain medication took effect, some of the tension left Lena's face. What's the verdict, doctor? She asked, her voice steadier. Clean break, which is good news. We'll need to set it properly in the medical bay, followed by surgical intervention to clean and close the wound, then immobilization with a cast. Adrian finished securing the temporary splint. You'll be looking at about 6 to 8 weeks for the bone to heal, followed by physical therapy to rebuild strength. The silence from the alien students was profound. It was Zyler who finally spoke, his crystalline voice reflecting his disbelief. 8 weeks. For a complete fracture of a major load-bearing limb. That's correct, Adrian confirmed, preparing Lena for transport. Human bones heal relatively quickly compared to some species. The cast will keep the bone aligned properly while the body's natural healing process takes place. But that's so slow, one of the mechanoid students objected. We could fabricate a replacement bone within hours, which would be rejected by her immune system, causing potentially fatal complications, Adrian pointed out. And even if we could create a compatible replacement, the surgical risks would far outweigh the benefits for a healing process that's already naturally efficient. Thar, who had been watching the proceedings with a mixture of horror and fascination, finally found his voice again. You're not angry with me, he observed, sounding confused. I caused this terrible injury, but you haven't even mentioned punishment. Adrian glanced up, genuinely surprised. Accidents happen, Thar, especially in mixed-species environments where physical capabilities vary so widely. It wasn't intentional, and assigning blame doesn't help heal the injury. As a medical transport arrived and Lena was carefully moved onto it, Adrian turned to address the gathered students. I know many of you find our medical approaches unusual or even inadequate. I understand that. But I'd ask you to observe, to learn, and to remember that different biological systems often require different approaches. What seems slow or primitive to you may be perfectly adapted to human physiology. With that, he accompanied Lena to the medical bay, leaving behind a group of confused but increasingly thoughtful alien students. The next few days saw a subtle shift in the dynamics of the exchange program. Word of Lena's injury and treatment had spread quickly, leading to increased curiosity about human medical practices. Adrian found himself fielding more questions during his rounds, with students from various species stopping by the medical bay not for treatment, but for information. Zyler, whose arm was showing clear signs of healing, had become something of an unexpected ambassador. The stabilizing treatment has been 97% effective, he explained to a group of fellow Silicon-based students during one visit. The fracture is already showing significant reintegration, and the process has been remarkably free of complications. Mira remained skeptical, but had begun asking more detailed questions about human healing processes. Your regenerative capabilities are limited compared to my species, she noted during one discussion. Yet your treatment protocols seem designed to maximize these natural processes rather than supplement them with technology. Is this a philosophical choice? Partly, Adrian admitted. Human medicine has a long history of balancing intervention with natural healing. We've learned, sometimes the hard way, that more treatment isn't always better treatment. But it's also practical. Our biology has evolved specific healing mechanisms that often work most efficiently when supported rather than replaced. Even Kthar had become a regular visitor, initially out of concern for Lena, but increasingly out of genuine interest. The massive alien had been deeply affected by causing such a serious injury and seemed determined to understand how to better interact with physically fragile species. In my culture, he explained to Adrian during one visit, serious injury often leads to replacement or enhancement. When I broke my arm as a child, it was reinforced with biomechanical supports that made it stronger than before. The idea of simply waiting for healing seems foreign. Different approaches for different needs, Adrian replied. Your species evolved on a high-gravity world with significant predator threats. Rapid return to full function could be a matter of survival. Humans evolved in an environment where recovery time was generally less critical. Lena, for her part, had become something of a minor celebrity among the exchange students. Her cast, a lightweight but durable composite material, had become covered with signatures and messages in dozens of alien scripts. She bore the attention with good humor, even allowing several curious students to observe her physical therapy sessions under Adrian's supervision. It's actually been educational, she told Adrian during checkup. Many of them have never seen a long-term healing process up close. To some of the Silicon-based students, the concept of a bone knitting itself back together without technological intervention is fascinating. You've become an unwitting ambassador for human biology, Adrian observed with a smile. How's the pain today? Manageable. The exercises are harder than I expected, though. That's normal. The muscles atrophy quickly when immobilized. Building them back takes time and consistent effort. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Ambassador Tholak, a senior representative of the Signan Cooperative and one of the program's most distinguished participants. The ambassador species resembled massive cephalopods, with multiple limbs extending from a central body covered in chromatophores that shifted color with their moods. Currently, the ambassador's skin was displaying patterns of deep blue and purple, which Adrian recognized as indicators of physical discomfort. Medical Officer Mercer, the ambassador greeted him formally. I find myself in need of consultation. Adrian gestured to a specially designed examination area that could accommodate the ambassador's unique physiology. Of course, Ambassador. What seems to be the problem? As Tholak settled into the examination area, their chromatophores shifted to include flickers of embarrassed orange. I have been experiencing discomfort in my tertiary limbs for several day cycles. Our usual treatment would involve neural realignment using specialized equipment, but the procedure is somewhat uncomfortable, and the relief is often temporary. Adrian conducted a careful examination, using specialized scanners designed for cephalopoid physiology. After several minutes, he sat back thoughtfully. Ambassador, what I'm seeing appears to be a form of inflammation in the neural sheaths of your tertiary limbs. It's similar to a condition we sometimes see in certain Earth cephalopods, particularly those in captivity where the water chemistry isn't optimally balanced. Tholak's skin rippled with surprise. You are suggesting an environmental cause rather than a neural misalignment? Possibly. The station's water composition is designed to be neutral for multiple species, but your biology might be particularly sensitive to certain mineral balances. Adrian tapped at his console, reviewing data. I'd like to try a two-pronged approach. A mild anti-inflammatory treatment combined with a specialized mineral supplement for your personal water supply. It's a simpler intervention than neural realignment, but it addresses what I believe is the underlying cause rather than just the symptoms. The ambassador was silent for a moment, their skin shifting through thoughtful patterns of green and blue. Your approach is not what I expected. On my world, we would focus on correcting the neural patterns that are producing the discomfort. I understand. And that approach certainly has merit, Adrian acknowledged. But if the neural patterns are themselves a response to environmental stress, treating only the nerves might provide temporary relief while the underlying issue continues. After a moment of consideration, Tholak's skin settled into a calm, decided pattern. I will try your method, medical officer. I admit to being curious about these different approaches I have been hearing about from the students. As Adrian prepared the treatments, he noticed Zyler and Kthar lingering near the entrance to the medical bay, clearly interested in the proceedings but hesitant to intrude on the ambassador's privacy. With a slight smile, he gestured for them to approach. Ambassador, if you don't mind, I have 2 students who have been learning about comparative medicine. Would you object to their observation of this treatment approach? Tholak's skin flickered with amusement. The infamous ice and rest students? By all means. As Zyler and Kthar approached, Adrian explained the treatment he was preparing. A specialized mineral solution to be added to the ambassador's personal water supply, combined with a mild, topically applied anti-inflammatory gel designed specifically for cephalopoid physiology. The principle is similar to what we discussed with your injuries, he told them. Identify the underlying cause, create optimal conditions for the body's natural systems to function, and provide targeted support where needed. The 2 students watched with fascination as Adrian demonstrated how to apply the gel to the affected neural pathways using a specialized applicator. The ambassador's chromatophores responded immediately, flashing with momentary discomfort before settling into a more relaxed pattern. Remarkable, Tholak commented. There's already a reduction in discomfort without the usual neural shock of realignment. Adrian handed the ambassador a supply of the mineral supplement and additional anti-inflammatory gel. Continue this treatment for 10 days. The inflammation should gradually decrease, and the mineral balance will help prevent recurrence. After the ambassador had departed, expressing cautious optimism about the treatment, Zyler turned to Adrian with new respect evident in his crystalline features. You applied the same principles to a completely different species and physiology, he observed. It's not just about ice and rest at all, is it? It's about understanding the body's own mechanisms and working with them rather than overriding them. That's exactly right, Adrian confirmed. Every species has evolved incredible systems for maintaining and repairing their bodies. Sometimes the most effective medicine is simply removing obstacles to those natural processes. Kthar nodded slowly, his massive form thoughtful. On my world, we often see technology as the answer to all physical limitations. But perhaps there is wisdom in sometimes allowing biology to follow its course. Over the following weeks, a remarkable transformation took place in the medical bay. What had begun as skepticism and even disdain for Adrian's methods gradually evolved in a genuine interest and respect. Lena's leg continued to heal on schedule, with X-rays showing excellent bone alignment and the beginning of solid callus formation. Zyler's fracture had completely reintegrated, leaving only a faint line that would eventually disappear entirely. More significantly, a small group of students had begun to regularly observe and even assist with basic procedures in the medical bay. Kthar, whose initial horror at injuring Lena had transformed into a dedicated interest in human physiology, had proven particularly adept at learning to adjust his enormous strength for delicate medical tasks. Zyler's precise movements made him an excellent assistant for detailed work, while Myra's knowledge of regenerative biology offered interesting perspectives that sometimes complemented Adrian's approaches. Even Alori had found a place in this impromptu study group, her species' empathic abilities proving surprisingly useful in helping anxious patients relax during treatments. She had begun to integrate elements of human medical philosophy into her spiritual healing practices, creating what she called a harmony of approaches. The most significant moment came 6 weeks after Lena's injury, when she arrived at the medical bay for another follow-up scan. The latest X-rays showed excellent healing, with the bone fully knitted and beginning to remodel. "I think we can remove the cast today," Adrian announced, examining the images. "The bone has healed enough to support normal activities, though you'll need to continue physical therapy to rebuild full strength." As he prepared the tools to remove the cast, he noticed that the medical bay had quietly filled with student observers, many of whom had been following Lena's healing process with interest. What had initially been shocking to them, the primitive approach of immobilizing a limb and waiting weeks for natural healing, had become a fascinating case study in human resilience. The removal of the cast became something of an impromptu ceremony, with students from a dozen species watching intently as Adrian carefully cut through the composite material and gently removed it to reveal Lena's pale, slightly atrophied leg beneath. "It looks so weak," Thar observed with concern. "Temporarily," Adrian assured him. "The muscles have atrophied from lack of use, but they'll rebuild quickly with proper exercise. The bone itself is actually stronger at the fracture site than it was before." Lena carefully flexed her knee, wincing slightly at the stiffness. "It feels strange, like it belongs to someone else." "That's normal. Your proprioception will readjust quickly as you start using it again." Adrian helped her to stand, supporting her as she cautiously put weight on the leg for the first time in weeks. "How does it feel?" "Stable." Lena took a tentative step, then another. "Weak but not painful." A ripple of what could only be described as appreciative murmurs went through the observing students. For many of them, this moment represented the culmination of a healing process they had initially dismissed as hopelessly inefficient. Instead, they were witnessing its success, the natural restoration of function without invasive technology or artificial replacement. Later that day, as Adrian was completing his records, a delegation of students arrived at the medical bay. Led by Xyler, Kthar, Mira, and Alori, the group included representatives from nearly every species in the exchange program. "Medical Officer Mercer," Xyler began formally, "we have come to express our appreciation for the knowledge you have shared with us over these past weeks." Adrian looked up in surprise. "I've hardly given formal lessons, but you have taught nonetheless," Mira continued, "by demonstrating approaches to healing that many of us had dismissed as primitive or inefficient. You have challenged our assumptions about medical care." Thar stepped forward, carefully holding what appeared to be a crystalline object. "We have created this for you. Each of us has contributed something from our own medical traditions, but integrated in a way that honors the principles you have shown us." The object was a small sculpture, clearly crafted with Xyler's crystalline technology, but incorporating elements from multiple species. A section that pulsed with Alori's harmonic energies, microscopic regenerative structures from Myra's world, and strength-enhancing lattices inspired by Ursan medicine. At its core was a simple representation of a human hand supporting what appeared to be a diverse array of alien forms. "It represents what we have learned," Alori explained, her gaseous body glowing with sincere blues and greens. "That healing comes in many forms across the galaxy, but at its heart is the support of natural processes and respect for each being's unique biology." Adrian accepted the gift with genuine emotion. "I'm honored, and I want you to know that I've learned as much from all of you as you may have learned from me." "We have also begun compiling what we call the Mercer Principles," added a mechanoid student. "A guide to interspecies medical care that emphasizes your approach of identifying underlying causes, creating optimal conditions for natural healing, and providing targeted support where needed. With your permission, we would like to share these principles with future exchange students and perhaps even our homeworlds." Adrian was momentarily speechless. What had begun as routine medical care had somehow evolved into something much more significant, a true cultural exchange that transcended the boundaries of biology and tradition. "I would be honored," he finally replied, "though I think Mercer Principles gives me far too much credit. These are ideas that have evolved over centuries of human medicine, often learned through trial and error. Yet you have translated them effectively across species barriers," Ambassador Tholack observed, having quietly joined the gathering. The ambassador's chromatophores displayed patterns of health and contentment that had been absent during their initial consultation. "My discomfort has entirely resolved, using methods that our own medical traditions might have overlooked as too simple. There is wisdom in simplicity when that simplicity is based on deep understanding." As the gathering dispersed, Adrian found himself alone with Lena, who had watched the proceedings with a smile. "Quite a change from Iceman," she observed, carefully practicing her physical therapy exercises. "Sometimes the best teaching happens when you're not trying to teach," Adrian replied, still somewhat overwhelmed by the student's gesture. They came here expecting advanced technology and instant solutions. Instead, they found patience, observation, and respect for natural processes. "My grandmother would approve," Lena said. "She always said the best doctor knows when to act boldly, and when to step back and let the body heal itself." In the days that followed, the medical bay took on a new energy. What had begun as informal observation gradually evolved into a more structured knowledge exchange. Students from various species would demonstrate their traditional healing techniques, while Adrian would explain the human rationale for different approaches. The discussions were lively, sometimes contentious, but always respectful. Thar had become particularly invested in understanding the balance between intervention and natural recovery. "In my culture," he explained during one session, "we see injury as a weakness to be immediately corrected and improved upon. The idea of temporary vulnerability as part of healing is new to me. Yet your own species has powerful natural healing," Adrian pointed out. "Your biomechanical enhancements work so well precisely because they integrate with those natural systems rather than replacing them entirely." Mira, who had initially been the most skeptical of Adrian's methods, had begun experimenting with modified versions of her regenerative techniques that worked with rather than accelerated natural healing processes. "The results are less immediate," she admitted, "but also produce fewer complications in the long term. It's a trade-off I hadn't fully considered before." Even Alori had found a middle ground between her spiritual healing traditions and more physical approaches. "The body and spirit are not separate," she explained, her gaseous form shifting through thoughtful purples. "One affects the other. Creating physical conditions that support healing also creates spiritual harmony." The term's final project approached, a collaborative presentation in which mixed-species teams would demonstrate their learning from the exchange program. Adrian was surprised and touched when one team requested his assistance with their project, Healing Across the Stars, Comparative Medical Philosophies and Practices. Led by Zyler, Thar, Mira, and Ilori, with Lena serving as the human representative, the team had crafted a presentation that examined how different species approached health, injury, and recovery. Rather than arguing for any one approach as superior, they emphasized the contextual wisdom in each tradition and explored how they might complement one another. "We wish to demonstrate with a practical example," Zyler explained as they prepared, "something that shows how different medical philosophies can work together." They had chosen a hypothetical but realistic scenario, a mixed-species expedition encountering a toxic environment that affected each physiology differently. Their presentation would demonstrate how an integrated approach, combining rapid intervention where necessary with support for natural healing processes, will provide optimal care for all affected beings. Adrian provided guidance on human physiological responses while learning fascinating details about how other species dealt with toxins. Myra's people, it turned out, had evolved extraordinary filtration systems that could be temporarily overloaded but would recover if given proper support. Thar's species had developed symbiotic gut bacteria that could be cultivated to neutralize specific toxins. Zyler's crystalline biology was vulnerable to certain chemical interactions, but could literally shed affected outer layers if the core remained protected. The day of the presentation arrived, and Adrian took a seat in the audience. The team's demonstration was masterful, clear, scientifically accurate, and deeply respectful of all traditions while still acknowledging their different strengths and limitations. They concluded with what they called the Harmonia approach, named after the station itself, a framework for interspecies medical cooperation that emphasized 1. Understanding the evolutionary context of each species' biology. 2. Respecting natural healing processes while providing targeted intervention when necessary. 3. Recognizing that optimal care might look very different across species. 4. Maintaining humility and openness to different approaches. As the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, Adrian felt a profound sense of satisfaction. This was what the exchange program was truly about. Not just tolerance of differences, but genuine understanding and integration of diverse perspectives. The term's end approached rapidly after that. Students began preparing to return to their home worlds, gathering the knowledge and experiences they would take with them. Adrian found himself busier than ever, not with treating injuries, but with answering questions and providing resources to students who wished to continue their comparative medical studies. On the final evening before departures began, Adrian was surprised by an invitation to a gathering in one of the station's common areas. When he arrived, he found nearly all the students from the exchange program waiting, along with faculty and administrators. Ambassador Tholak glided forward, chromatophores displaying formal ceremonial patterns. Medical Officer Mercer, we have asked you here to formally recognize your contribution to this exchange program. What began as routine medical care evolved into one of the most valuable cultural exchanges we have witnessed in the program's history. The ambassador gestured to a display showing communications from various homeworlds. Several planetary medical councils have expressed interest in the principles and approaches discussed by our students. There's talk of establishing a dedicated medical exchange program focused specifically on integrating diverse healing traditions. Zyler stepped forward next, his crystalline body now showing no sign of the fracture that had started this journey. We wish to present you with this, he said, indicating what appeared to be a small data crystal. It contains the beginning of what we hope will become a comprehensive guide to interspecies medicine, building on what we've learned from you and from each other. Thar joined him, carefully holding a more traditional plaque inscribed in multiple languages. And this physical token of our appreciation to remind you of the impact you've had on all of us. Adrian accepted both gifts, genuinely moved. I came to this station to practice medicine across species boundaries. I never expected to become part of something much larger. He looked around at the gathered students, beings from across the galaxy with vastly different biologies and cultures, now united in mutual respect and understanding. You've all taught me as much as I may have taught you. Medicine at its best isn't about technology or technique. It's about paying attention, respecting natural processes, and remaining open to different ways of understanding the body and healing. Lena approached, walking confidently now, her leg fully healed. We've been talking, she said, indicating the group of students who had become Adrian's informal assistants, and we've decided to formalize our study group. We're calling it the Comparative Healing Alliance, and we've already received approval to continue our work via remote collaboration after we return home. The goal, Mira added, is to develop truly integrated medical approaches that draw on the strengths of all our traditions. Not human medicine or aquiline medicine or crystalline medicine, but something new that honors all of them. As the evening continued, Adrian found himself in conversation with Dr. Ilara Vastri, the program's director. You've started something significant here, Adrian, she observed. Something that could have implications far beyond this station. It wasn't intentional, he admitted. I was just doing my job. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen that way, she replied. By simply addressing what's in front of you with attention and care. She gestured toward the students, now engaged in animated discussions about future collaborations. They came here expecting to learn about cultural differences, and they did, but they also learned about the underlying commonalities that unite all living beings. The need to heal, to care for one another, to find balance between intervention and natural processes. The next morning, Adrian stood in the docking bay, saying farewell to the departing students. Each goodbye was different. A crystalline chime from Xyler that represented deep respect in his culture, a gentle and carefully controlled embrace from Cathar, a swirl of grateful colors from Alori, a formal exchange of regenerative knowledge from Mira. Lena was among the last to depart. "This isn't really goodbye, she told him. "The Comparative Healing Alliance is just getting started. We'll be calling on your expertise regularly. And I'll be relying on yours," Adrian replied. "This has always been a two-way exchange." As the final shuttle departed, Adrian walked slowly back to the medical bay. It felt strangely empty now, without the curious students and lively debates that filled it in recent weeks. He sat at his desk, looking at the gifts he had received, the data crystal, the commemorative plaque, and the small sculpture representing diverse healing traditions united in common purpose. On his screen, messages were already arriving from medical institutions across known space, expressing interest in the Harmonia approach and requesting more information about human medical philosophies. What had begun with a simple fractured arm and the prescription, "Ice it and you'll be fine," had somehow blossomed into an interstellar medical dialogue. Adrian smiled as he began composing responses. In treating the body with patience and respect for its natural processes, they had inadvertently discovered a model for treating cultural differences as well. With patience, respect, and an understanding that sometimes the wisest intervention is simply creating the right conditions and letting natural growth occur. And all it had taken was a bag of ice.